Hi again, everybody. I'm Ben Parker. This is the Box Score Network. That's Robertson Vire. It is a privilege to have all of you on board with us. This is Odds on Commanders, our YouTube show dedicated every 2 weeks to doing nothing but talking about the Commanders. And we're at the time of year where it's all draft all the time, nationwide. I don't care if you're a college football fan or if you're an NFL fan or if you're just a fan of one team like we are. It's the draft. And so we are heavy on the draft tonight. We'll be looking at it from a number of different ways. We're excited. I hope you are. The draft is just about a week and a half away at the making of this recording. Robertson, how you feeling tonight, man? You ready for this thing?
And I'm ready. Draft is just right around the corner. Is it this? No, it's next Thursday. And we're at 29 right now. I don't know that we're staying at 29, but we're gonna be talking about what we're gonna be doing at 29 if we stay. So I'm ready for it to just be over at this point. Not that it's not fun, but it's like there's so much speculation.
Right.
There's only so much speculation you can do at some point, you know.
Yes.
We have it. This will be our last little bit of it. We can get our last couple ideas in before, because our next episode will be right after the draft. So make sure you stick around, subscribe, and do all that so you can see our reactions to after the draft. But um, this is our last show before the draft, and I'm excited.
And listen, go over to Box Score Network. We have tons of other material there. We'll even tell you about some podcasts that are connected to Box Score Network as well later on in this show. But listen, with the draft being right on top of us here and the Commanders being a major part of that, as always, and even more so now that we're actually winning, we've put together quite a show for you tonight. Robertson, go ahead and take it away. Get us started here. Get us rolling on this pathway of conversation.
Yeah, so really the goal of this tonight, we're gonna do our own little mock draft here a little bit later for first couple rounds because after it gets past round two and even halfway through the third round, it's just kind of a crapshoot. It's you choose who you want, who's the best player available on your board, where can you fill the holes, fill the needs, and so forth. So, um, a lot of Washington fans think that okay, we made the NFC Championship game, we're right there, and in theory, yes, we are. Um, we had another round of 1 year deals. We were 1 year deal heavy again this offseason, just trying to continue to put band-aids on, but also add depth, add some younger players, add veteran leadership where it was needed. And we did a lot better job of that this year. Well, I mean, obviously it's going to be remains to be seen what's going to happen, but it seems we added a lot more depth this year than we could last year. So I'm pleased about that. Um, but everyone thinks, oh, we're just a couple players away. It's like, not really, and I'm going to show you why. So this is a first one here, Ben. I don't know if you are totally familiar with our history in terms of drafting, at least with first round picks, but it's not great. A lot of fans are very familiar with this kind of, uh, you know, slide here, and how terrible specifically since 2019 has been. The remaining players since 20, actually going back all the way to 2010. Trent Williams no longer on the roster. Ryan Kerrigan retired already. RG3, we already know that. 2013, 2014, no first round picks. Sheriff's on another team. Dotson, bust, is no longer in the NFL. Allen and Payne, Allen's gone. Payne probably will be either during the season or next offseason. He'll be gone as well. Haskins, God rest his soul, didn't work out. Montez Sweat got shipped out. Chase Young, bust. Jamin Davis, bust. Jahan Dotson, bust. Emmanuel Forbes, bust. There, Jaden Daniels is what we're clinging to here, right? If it works out, none of the other stuff matters, right? But just in terms of when you're looking at the entire roster, we don't have top end talent because it's literally not there anymore. Like all these guys, you can say were uber talented, but they just never panned out at their positions or with us on our team. So there is a severe lack of the past 5, 6, 7 years of talent that we don't have. Okay. And this is just kind of another illustration of this is the past few drafts, and 90 to 95% of these players that you see on the screen here, other than 2024, they're not here anymore. Quan Martin's still here. Brian Robinson Jr. is still here. Percy Butler's still here. Sam Cosmi's still here. John Bates. That's it. Out of the past 4 or 5 drafts, you got 4 players left. That's bad. That's really bad. And it's not. And look, this I'm not blaming the current front office, right? They just got here a season ago, so we'll see how this last year's draft class pans out. We'll see how this year's draft class pans out. But my point in showing you this is we are at a major talent deficit. Why, I can show you right now, is this is who many people could deem to see our biggest competitor. Look at their draft. Just look at their first round picks the past 4 or 5 years. Quinyon Mitchell, Defensive Rookie of the Year candidate, right? Jalen Carter, Defensive Player of the Year candidate, right? Nolan Smith, he carved out a nice niche role for himself. Jordan Davis, not as great as some people would think he should be at this point in his career, but still very early in his career. Devontae Smith, not a star receiver, but one of the better receivers in the NFL. And then you look at guys like Cam Jurgens, Nakobe Dean, Landon Dickerson, Cooper DeJean, Kelly Ringo might have an increased role this season. So they have a lot of talent and a lot of young talent and a lot of depth at positions that we don't have. We just don't have that. So look at this and then look at that. That's the difference. And it doesn't take one off season to fix that. It takes multiple off seasons to fix that. So my point in showing everyone this is to kind of focus on what's important, and that's just adding talent. It doesn't matter where it's added, we just need it, across the board. Now you can say, oh, well, we did enough to, you know, get to a certain point. We added Debo Samuel, we added Laramie Tunsil, and that increased the ceiling and also increased the floor in terms of talent. But generally speaking, we're still devoid of it across the board and at some important positions, high end talent. We have some very nice players, but not top end, incredibly talented first round guys.
Yeah, I agreed. And listen, we could have excuse me, conversations about each of these first round picks from the past 15, 14 years about why they didn't work out, or why we didn't have a first round draft pick, or maybe that was the coaching staff's fault, not the front office's fault, or maybe the reverse, maybe the front office sucked and the coaching staff was actually doing a pretty good job, or hey, these picks were actually pretty solid, maybe from a 3 or 4 year span, but everything else is bad. But that's not the conversation that I want to have tonight. The conversation I want to keep it on is what you started it on: is hey, for whatever reason, money, talent, whatever, these guys aren't on the team anymore. And I know that you do sometimes hit on a second, third, or fourth round pick to kind of make up on a first round miss, and that's true. But you talked about that too. So many of those players, for whatever reason, are not on the team. And the point remains, and this is the point, is that you have a talent deficit, whether it's from a starting, caliber talent method, or just the depth at some of these positions. It is a talent deficit, and it's not just compared to the Eagles. It's compared to several teams at the NFL level. And yeah, you can fix it. I think they're on their way here. We love the direction that's going, but there is still work to do to get this to consistently being year in and year out starters that have talent, and then even the depth. And part of that too is people say, well, you've got serviceable guys that you brought in as free agents, like you just mentioned. Well, that's also true, but they're older and they're more expensive. So you would like to be able to get back more to, hey, it's the draft funneling this, because then we are younger. We tend to be more injury friendly with younger players, and we tend to be cheaper. And then not only that, just the athleticism, because you can have serviceable starters, but if they're not those guys that were drafted first, second round, they tend not to be as fast. They tend not to be as athletic. And so even if they are good serviceable starters, you still tend to miss something overall. I even heard Bill Belichick talk about two different defenses last year when he was on the Manning cast last year, and he was talking about how those two defenses, not even the Commanders, lacked overall speed, and part of that usually goes back to the draft. It's like, man, you're missing on these first and second round guys where that athleticism and speed is. And yeah, you got a third round guy who's stepping in there and playing admirably, but he's just not going to have that high end. So your point is excellent. It's well illustrated here. I totally agree with it. And we're not even going to have all these kind of sidebar conversations about these individual players and why. But the point remains, there is a talent deficit. There's a lot of work still to be done.
And if you want to know what me and Ben think about what our highest needs are, or or what our priorities are, or what we
Yeah,
think the priorities are for the Commanders, go listen to the last couple episodes we posted. Because at this point we'd be beating a dead horse. We talked about it ad nauseum at this point
we
on
did.
YouTube, and I think we did a great job of it. But we really go in detail, and it's still relevant. It's not old stuff. It's still relevant up until next Thursday. But
Right.
if you've been watching us, you know what we think the priorities are. And that's not to say though, just because they're priorities doesn't mean I think at 29, just in general philosophy, other than quarterback, you go best player available. Um, because of the lack of high end talent at almost every position other than quarterback. And you could argue receiver, I suppose. But, you know, I'd be fine drafting a receiver at 29. I'd be fine drafting a running back. You could make a case, a solid case, drafting any player at any position, right? I mean that's my philosophy on it. Even offensive tackle, because I mean, yeah, you're gonna allow Brandon Coleman to try right tackle, but that's not a guarantee. So if you can draft a guy like a Simmons or a Connerly to just plug and play and not even have to worry about it, like hey, you guys fight for inside a guard, like Wiley and Coleman. It's like yeah, you guys fight inside a guard and we'll replace one of you when Cosme comes back. I mean, that's fine too. I'm fine with that. Or if you draft an interior offensive lineman, just settle the guard position outright. Safety, corner, the linebacker, edge rusher obviously is, a top need, but you can sell me on any position here. And it's not going to be a wrong answer, I don't think.
Agreed. And that was the approach we took in the mock draft 2 weeks ago. It's probably the approach we'll take again in tonight's mock draft. And that's true in most years that, hey, at a certain point, you're taking best player available. But I think in this year's draft, especially when we look at the people that might be sitting there at the back end of that first round, it's a pretty good spread across a lot of different positions about what kind of talent you might be looking at. So, I totally agree.
All right. So me and Ben have compiled a list of potential targets at 29. Some of them are his, some of them are mine. It's really just a compiled list. If you see a guy that should be on there that's not on there, put it in the comments. We'll read it. We'll respond to it. Um, these are guys that we think are going to be around that late 20s area. Half these guys probably are not going to be there because that's just how it works. That's how the draft works. Some of these guys are going to fall. Some of these guys are going to go earlier than what's expected. But these are the guys that we wouldn't be necessarily shocked if they were available at 29. Um, and if they have the asterisk beside it, put a note down there that these are guys that if they fall within a few picks of us, that we would actually trade up for. We'd be willing to trade up for. Those guys noted would be Donovan Ezaraku out of Boston College, James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, Shamar Stewart out of A&M, Mike Green out of Marshall. I would trade up for him if he starts falling in that 25 to 26 range. If he makes it there, makes it that far. Um, Jade Barron, I know he's a guy that you're really high on, corner out of Texas. And then Colston Loveland, which I wouldn't trade up for a tight end, me personally, but you would because you really love Loveland.
Yeah, and listen, before I even dive in on any of these players here, because we should talk about at least a handful of them before
Hmm.
we get too far over. Um, Let me just address a couple of larger issues. I listen. Somebody's probably already typing into the comments right now.
Yeah,
Player XYZ will not be there at 29. That's fine. We
we
get
know
it.
that.
All right.
We
Just
know.
yeah. If you want to toss it in the comments, please, cast your
Yeah.
pearls before us swine. We will humbly take it. All right.
Yeah.
We get it. And I'm sure there's some other people on the other hand typing in, hey, trade back, trade back, trade back, which is great. Me and Robertson both would be happy to trade back and maybe still get probably one of these guys, right? I
Yeah.
mean, trade back to 35 and catch one of these guys. Totally got it. All right. But under the scenario that there's not a great trade back, or maybe somebody trades up to 28 instead of us at 29,
Hmm.
or maybe they find a sweeter trade in spot at 30 than at 29, then we're sticking and picking, right? The trade just isn't always sitting there. And what we are looking at, listen, you can make an argument that most of these guys could conceivably be there at 29. I've seen Nick Emanwari slip out of a lot of first round mocks. I've seen the defensive tackles in a lot of mocks that tend to be more 7-on-7 heavy. I've seen
Mhm.
those defensive tackles slip out of the first round. Same thing for Shamar Stewart. There are people that love Shamar, and there are people that don't because of the lack of sack production. Same thing for James Pierce. There are people that love his speed off the edge, but there are people who don't consider him a three-down player, so they have him sitting in the second round. You look at Malachi Starks, who seems to be a rock-steady player. I've still seen people who aren't thrilled with his athleticism, nor necessarily his ability to kind of cover slot one-on-one, who have him dropping out of the first round, which I don't think is going to happen, but I've seen it. You can go
Mhm.
up and down this list with, I think, everybody except maybe two of these players that I've actually seen consistently over the past couple of weeks slip out of the first round. So you really get to the point in this draft somewhere, I don't know, somewhere around pick 14, 15, 16, where from there, no matter whose big board you are, from there all the way to back to about pick 40, it's really hard to differentiate these players in a significant way. We break them down on our preferences, but it is hard. So I'm gonna kick it back to you for just a second. Let's start talking
Mhm.
about any one of these players you do or don't like, especially here at 29, and then I'll talk about a couple as well. But that just generically, that's kind of what we're looking at here.
I mean, I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, if you're looking at this list and screaming at us right now, like I said, put it in the comments section. We will gladly respond to anything you have to say about this. But the fact of the matter is, we look at this as okay. Are these players going to be? Would we be shocked if any of these players are at 29? No, not necessarily. Some of you might be. Some of you are like, "Oh, that's crazy that they'd be there at 29." Others be like, "Why would you even consider that guy at 29?" And that's fine, But that's why we're doing this. We're having this conversation. We're compiling a list of these guys, and there might be a guy that's not on this list that should have went top 12, right? And he's just falling right like a rock, right? Some people think Mike Green is that guy. Some people think James Pierce should go a lot higher than
Yeah,
back of the first round, right?
right.
Ezeraku, that seems to be another guy that's been incredibly controversial lately, where he could be top 15, but he could also maybe even slip out of the first round. Like he's just one of these guys that some people like Shamar Stewart, that some people love, some people don't. So I'm not going to fight anyone necessarily too much on, oh, you don't have this guy, or you should have this guy instead, or this guy shouldn't even be on the list. Um, I will say in Emeka Egbuka, everyone seems to really like him, right? Everyone seems to really like him. That he's one of the most polished route runners, one of the most polished receivers in this draft, but everyone has him almost outside the first round in almost every mock draft. And I don't quite, if everyone loves him so much, right? I don't know if it's because he's not a super speed guy, if he's just a slot guy, projecting the slot guy in the next at the next level. He's just not that explosive, but he's almost like that. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but like an Amon-Ra St. Brown type of player where he's just like that slot manipulator. I don't know. I don't know. But if everyone loves him so much, then why wouldn't he go, top half of the first round? Maybe it's just because of the physical stuff. But if he's there at 29 and we draft him, I won't love it, but I won't hate it either. I'd be like, yeah, sure, why not? Like let's solidify that, and for one reason. There is only one receiver on our roster after this season. Now, obviously, the extension's probably gonna get done with Terry McLaurin, but right now we only have one receiver on our roster after this season, so it wouldn't be the worst investment.
No, agreed. And listen, let's talk about Ibuka just for a second, then I'll hit some other guys here. By the way, I love everybody. I really do like just about everybody on this list so good that I would love to even figure out a way to get back maybe to pick 40, 42 and grab a second one of them. Commanders don't have enough draft picks to make that happen. But again, that's how much I like this group here. These guys really seem like they can offer you a lot of great starter potential here. With Ibuka, it does feel like there's a ceiling on just exactly how good, how explosive that he could actually be. It doesn't feel like an all-pro kind of a talent base that you're working with, but boy, you get that next level down, kind of early second round, late first round kind of a talent. Polish is a perfect word for him. Professional is a perfect word for him. Um, Adult is a great word for him. I mean, just everything that you look for here in a good, solid starter who maybe could get some Pro Bowls, it's all there with Ibuka. But again, you don't have kind of that home run pop, that kind of exclusive athleticism that you would look for in maybe a top 20 kind of a pick. On the flip side of that, Eamon Warry's got that in spades, but Eamon Warry, the safety from South Carolina, doesn't really seem to necessarily have great coverage skills. And then you're starting to look back him maybe a versatile safety, right? Maybe a guy carry the tight end routes. He can cover outside receivers, but only if it's bigger guys. He's not going to be able to carry those smaller ones, right? So now he's not your slot safety, right? And he's not your safety that can carry the fast wide receivers. So now you're thinking, well, I've got to play him in the box a lot, and then I play him in zone a lot, and then I use him to cover tight end routes and big wide receiver routes, which is all fine, but not every defense can use that. But boy, he's got just tremendous oodles of athleticism, speed, strength, size, you name it, it's all there. And Ibuka doesn't really have that. But you slide over to, say, the edges. Why not a Shamar Stewart, who gives you both the size and the pressures, if not the sacks? But you add him to a defense that maybe can use that. The Mike Green, just explosive off the edge, but also brings the off-field issues. James Pierce, explosive off the edge, but can he really be a three-down guy? As a Raku, really seemed to like his well-rounded game. I do think he's probably going first round somewhere. Just seems like he's really got a very well-rounded game against the run, smart player, long arms, gets pressure on the quarterback. So I would love to grab him. That's a guy I would trade up for. That's why he's asterisked there on my side of things. And even the defensive lineman here, say a Derek Harmon, you just rock solid on both getting to the quarterback and stopping the run. Love that. Walter Nolan isn't as solid consistently out of Ole Miss at defensive tackle, but boy, he flashes higher. He shows some of those high-end plays that you don't see from a whole lot of defensive tackles. So love that. Darius Alexander sitting back there, if you were to trade out, that would be a guy that gets pressure on the quarterback, I think, out of Toledo, but maybe doesn't play 3 downs because maybe he doesn't hold up against the run. I love so many of these players, man. I'm just kind of drooling over the list, to be honest. You only get one of them, it looks like. It's just a question of, can we trade back and get a guy we like, plus get a couple more picks here? It does illustrate the point, though. And listen, this is why almost every team that's drafting in this draft is talking about trading back. The mock drafters are. And we all get it. We all agree. But if everybody's wanting to trade back, who's going to trade up, right? There just aren't going to, basically you're looking at probably out of 32 picks in the first round, you're probably looking at 20 teams that would be willing to trade back and probably 3 to 4 that are willing to trade up. So that's where the supply demand is on that.
It's really going to be does Vegas or does Cleveland or does New York want to trade up back in the first round to get a Jackson Dart or somehow now a Jalen Milroe? Do they just want to get that 5th-year option, for cheap? So I do want to touch, because these were 2 guys that you specifically pointed out in pre-production on guys that you would trade up for, and we don't have a lot of picks. So guys that you pointed out were Jahdae Barron, corner out of Texas, and tight end Colson Loveland. Tell us why you would spend more draft capital to trade up and get these guys.
I have actually, since you and I have talked, I have moved off of Loveland a little bit as far as trading up.
Okay.
I'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about Jahdae Barron. Barron's a guy that I got interested in right before he got hot. I just literally happened to be watching some tape on another Texas player and saw him. And I was like, well, this guy looks pretty good. And I'd seen him on the mocks, and I really like versatility is the key for Barron. The fact that he can play outside corner, but probably is going to play slot, but he looks like he's really tough and willing against the run in the box, which leads you to believe he might be more the slot safety type if you needed him to. But boy, that idea, he's not going to make a living being a wide receiver bound to recover in the NFL. He's just not. You could use him as a zone player, but he's not going to be able to one-on-one these guys. He's just not. Smaller, quicker guys, sure, but not the bigger guys. So the idea that he could just be on an island out there as a CB on the boundary is just not realistic. He'd have to be a zone guy, but still, he can do just about 80% of what you might would want somewhere as a defensive back, right? So in the box, slot, push him back to some safety plays, but zone as an outside corner. There's a lot there to like, man. So really, good hands, seems to have the ball skills that people talk about. That seems to be there too. So a lot to like there. I would definitely trade up for him. And again, with no more draft picks than the Commanders have, you're not going to pull off a big coup up, right? But maybe to 25 range if Aaron happens to slip. And then back to Colston Loveland. I do like Loveland. I've got to say it. And Loveland really is a tough evaluation because the Michigan quarterback situation was really bad last year. I mean, it was really bad. It was tough to get a handle on Colston Loveland because boy, the quarterbacks just couldn't get the ball out there in a lot of cases. I mean, so you had Loveland having to come back in and do a lot of underneath stuff where he can do deeper. It did make it tough to evaluate. But when I the more tape I've watched on Colston Loveland, I see him as a late first, early second round pick. I would take him here if I was Washington, but I think I've backed off the idea of trading up for him.
Right. So this is a big list here, right? And some people are like, this is too much to
Yeah.
really kind of even process, right? And that's fine, right? So we can speculate all day long on who's going to be there at 29, but who is actually going to be there at 29 that we're actually interested in? Just say, for instance, that all of these guys, which is not going to happen, but just say all these guys are going to be there at 29. Well, who the heck are they going to even look at, right? Like, that's a lot of players to kind of narrow down for one pick, right? Well, I have a few thoughts on that. So last year, if you'll take a look here, I don't know if the audience is very familiar with that. Some people have probably really are, some people might not be. It's something called relative athletic score. For those that know it, they know it. It's measurables, it's height, weight, it's hand size. It is a 40 times, so it's straight line speed, it's quickness on the three cone drill, it's bench press. It takes all of these measurables and just kind of creates a score based on your just raw athleticism, and it gives you a score. This was, as most of you can see, is a snapshot of our draft class last year and their RAS, their relative athletic score. As you can see, last year we had one of the higher at relative athletic scores, of the entire draft. Like everyone was a 9 above. The only person that wasn't was Mike Samerstill, and that's because he's short and skinny. That's really the only reason. And Jaden Daniels does not have a RAS score because he didn't test last year. He didn't run the 40. He didn't do three cone. He didn't bench. He probably didn't really. I mean, he probably weighed in and stuff, but it didn't. There wasn't enough data to give him a RAS score. Okay, so if this is an indication to go on, right, that we're only interested in guys that have really high RAS scores, then let's take this previous list and look at the RAS scores. So I was conservative. I said, okay, let's only look at players that have above an 8.0. And this is the list based on the previous list that we just looked at. So based on that, this is the list of prospects that have above an 8.0 RAS score. As you can see, Nicky Minwari here has a 10.0. As a matter of fact, he has the highest RAS score of any strong safety prospect since 1987. So he is a physical freak in that regard. At the position, I don't know how tall he is, but he's pretty. He has a 43-inch vert, runs a 4.3 40, and is 220. I mean, this dude is a freaking monster. But as you said, there's some problems against him, right? So, on film. But if you're looking at pure athlete and like, hey, we can just stick this guy anywhere. So for in Washington's case, it's like we don't necessarily need him, but it'd be certainly nice to have him. And we have guys that can start. I don't think should start, but they can start. So we can just kind of see what this guy can do. It's a risk, I suppose, at 29, but I would be more than happy taking that risk because the draft is a crapshoot anyway. Um, so, Ben, your thoughts on just kind of looking at RAS score and looking at these and just kind of narrowing down the list?
Yeah. So, by the way, this is fantastic. This is where you still start to get away from just general mock drafting and team specific stuff. For them to have focused on Raz that much in last year's draft, their first one as a group, for you to pick up on that is fantastic. And to narrow that 20 something player group down to this is even better and more useful. And it's what you really have to do, because at a certain point you're like, man, what are we basing this on and what are we going after? One of the things you do notice, though, about, and this is not unusual, happens all the time, the guys with the higher RAS scores usually also have more questionable tape. It's really, really odd. If they didn't, if their tape is great and their RAS scores is high, they're gone in the top 10, right? At this part of the draft, which is where we are, which is where we drew from our player pool at, right? The original 20. When you are sitting here, you're having to make choices. Do I go after RAS guys, or do I go after guys whose film is just beautiful? And there aren't many of who meet both criteria, right? Ibuka is one of those guys. His film is tremendous. Now it's not explosive, but now you look at his RAS score, and it's just way up there, right? So,
Yeah.
and same thing for, say, Jade Barron. His film is very good. He doesn't have as impressive a RAS, but he's sitting there at a very good RAS, and so yeah, this is a more a narrowed pull down of what the Commanders might be looking at, and this is really helpful to narrow down what they might actually be thinking about.
So I even took it a step further. Okay. So most of the play, not all the players, but most of the players that were drafted last year were also team captains. Okay. So now I'm relying on some internet information that I kind of compiled last minute because it was a last minute thought. But now let's narrow this list down even further for guys with a RAS over 8.0 and guys that were listed according to the internet, which is obviously always correct. Um, Guys that were listed as team captains on their teams. And this is this list, which is even shorter. Okay. So if we're looking at guys with over an 8.0 RAS score that did actually test and qualify, and guys that were, according to the internet, team captains, we have Donovan Azaraku, James Pierce Jr., Nicky Minwari, Maxwell Hairston, Gray Zabel, Omarion Hampton, Travion Henderson, and Emeka Egbuka. Now, who of this group they have a first round grade on at all is up for debate, and we will probably never know that unless they actually end
Right.
up drafting them. How many of these players will actually be available? Again, probably three or four of them at least. I would imagine you'd be lucky if there was five there. Um, I'm gonna guess there's around three of these players are gonna be available at 29, maybe four depending if Hampton's gone or not. Um, so then at that point, whoever's available of this list, okay, what's the higher position in need? What's our grade on them? And can we trade back and still get this guy later? Now, if we're sticking at 29, it's like, okay, well, what's probably the more position in need, but who's the higher grade? That's what I can imagine would be the conversation. And if we look at all these factors here, are they going to draft someone that's not a team captain? Obviously, because only so many players can be team captains. But it's a trait that this front office has looked at and has valued, along with RAS score. So if again, we can only speculate, of course, but if we try to kind of aim it a little bit, okay, aim it at some of these markers, then we can try to start to narrow down and kind of try to tap into their thought process a little bit. It's like, okay, so these are the traits that are valuable to them. So who are they going to look at if that's the case? And it narrows down to this list. Again, it's not perfect. Where there's people that never didn't even make that first initial 20 that might be also on this list. But again, put it in the comments. Like let us know, right? Um, now Ben, I know you did mention something that's like, I mentioned that they're going to draft someone that's not a team captain. What is your kind of philosophy on being a team captain or just the RAS score in general? Like, are you going to draft someone that wasn't a team captain or had a below an 8 or even a 7 RAS score?
To me, it all helps. Now, am I willing to draft someone who's not a TC? Absolutely. Am I willing to draft somebody whose RAS was under 8? Absolutely. Even in the first round, this part of the first round, maybe not top 10ish, but this part, yeah, sure, absolutely. But again, if you're looking at guys who because again, you've done a great job of kind of funneling us through this thought process. If you're looking at guys who weren't team captains and whose RAS isn't great and whose tape also I wasn't thrilled with. I like the well, why would I draft that guy, right? Because now I've
Right.
got three things that are a little kind of, you know, I've got another great list of guys who I can work off of. So yeah, that's kind of my philosophy. I'll even add to the philosophy a little bit. This is kind of getting in my own personal thing. This particular group of guys that we're looking at, and this is usually true of late first, early second rounders, in a lot of cases, they're not going to be able to rescue a position group on their own, right?
No.
They just do not project to be that dominant. With that thought in mind, I prefer to draft in this range a guy who's already going to kind of be on a decent position group. So, for instance, even though I love Nick Eamon-Wari, I'm not totally thrilled with the idea of dropping him in with this safety cornerback group because I'm not sure that it's going to allow him to be who he would ideally be, right? We may be asking him to do things that he's not, you know, he's having to cover more ground and do more coverage skills things than he would like to, and we would like him to. So I might steer away from him with this thought process. I might steer more towards the wide receivers, you know, the Emeka Ibuka, or even say a Luther Burden by chance, just to strengthen a group like that, right? Or I might steer, listen, offensive line is not a strength, but it's no longer a weakness. Okay, it's very solid. You know, I would steer more toward a Gray Zabel at this point with that thought in mind, right? It's, hey, let's take these guys who look like they're going to be pretty good, but can't be group saviors. Let's put them with a decent group, and I think they'll flourish more likely that way. So that would add to my philosophy. And again, I like this whole group here. I do prefer Ezeraku out of this group. Out of everybody here, that's a name we kind of keep coming back to if he's there. But I like everybody on this group. Being able to add a Marion Hampton would add juice to the offense because now you've got an offensive line that you think, hey, can support a running back like this, right? So that's where I'm at.
No, it's not going to happen. I personally, I don't think Ezra is going to be there at 29. I would run the card up if Ezra was there. I just think that he has an excellent pass rush, kind of package of moves.
Right.
More so than I mean, it's not perfect and it's not like great, but just in comparison to the other prospects out there right now, he has a lot deeper of a bag than some of these guys. James Pierce being one of them, but James Pierce is so dynamic that you almost don't care. Same with Mike Green to an extent because there's also okay, he played at Marshall, but just looking at this list here, if they were all available, which they wouldn't be, I would lean Ezeraku as well. But I don't think Ezeraku is going to be there. I think there's a good chance that Pierce isn't there. I don't think Hampton's going to be there. I think Hampton goes before 29 as well. So if that is the case, that would leave you with Eamon Wari, Hairston, Zabel, Henderson, and Igbuka. I've talked myself almost tonight. I think you and myself have talked myself into Igbuka and choosing him at 29 because one has got, I mean, obviously RAS score here. 4.4 is not, I mean, it's a sub 4.5, but even at that, I mean, that's still pretty decent speed, and especially if he's a slot receiver. I mean, that's essentially speed to burn because you're facing slot corners that are yes a little bit more shifty, but you're facing linebackers and safeties. You're going to be able to blow right past some of these guys, right, or just outmaneuver them. And again, increasing the strength, which is something that you've done, something that believe is either Austin or Simon in the latest mock draft that had us, or maybe it was Peyton. It was one of you guys. One of you guys selected, I believe, or was it targeting a receiver for us to just kind of make the case like, well, let's increase,
Yeah.
continue building up on a strength. And I'm fine with that again because we also don't have a receiver under contract after this year. So I would choose if Ezeraku and Pierce aren't there, I would say Hampton as well. I would choose Ibuka just from this list.
Ibuka tends to be more of a safe pick, right? Because
I'm fine with
again,
that. I'm fine with a safe pick.
yeah, polished, professional wide receiver. I don't think will ever be anybody's number one receiver at any time in this league. And you could question if he's even the number two, but I think he might could be the number two. He can play outside. He tends to be more of a big slot, would really be more of his style, kind of taking a size advantage there, but he's got the speed too. he doesn't typically have that take the top off the defense kind of speed, but what he does have, and I got to see this on tape, for years at Ohio State, but especially as I've gone back over his tape again, his run after the catch is consistently good. He almost never goes down with the first, kind of arm tackle. You kind of either got to wrap him up or he's off. He almost always falls forward like a good running back. He usually picks up, if he's catching in motion, he'll pick up a good 3 to 5 yards on top of the route. And then he frequently, breaks them for, the 15 to 20 range. That's not unusual. So you just kind of always have plus, plus, plus yardage with him, even though it's not the explosiveness. But, it does seem to be the safe pick. And, if an Ezraku isn't there, who I do love, I'm totally happy here with Ibuka.
Is Travion Henderson a first-round pick?
Okay, to me, no. But I know enough people who like him that I respect that I'm fine if they were to do it. That's where I'm at there.
Right. And what about Maxwell Harrison? I don't think we've talked about him really much at all.
See, okay, I would lean more toward Harrison here than Henderson. Am I convinced that Harrison is a first round talent who can actually shut players down? No. I am convinced that Harrison is a sticky kind of a cover corner who you can ask to be one on one, and he will make life difficult on people at the NFL level. I have seen enough of that. He is going to have to, I think, mostly be a slot kind of a guy. He does bring attitude and aggressiveness. I don't think he's got that first round talent to shut people down, but make life difficult, yes, and Washington could use that, could use that kind of a thing. It would mean you start moving people around a little bit because I don't think Harrison is anywhere near as versatile as, say, a John A. Barron, excuse me, from Texas. But yeah, I would be tempted by Harrison here as well.
Right. Um, Also, I think it's safe to mention that most of these guys on this list specifically have also been on top 30 visits with Washington as well. So that's also something from last year that I believe all of the people that were drafted last year were on top 30 visits or visits in some way, form, or fashion. So that's also, I know the beat reporters and all that they release, who was on a visit this week or today or whatever else. 20 guys were actually just taking the top golf today. So on a
Wow.
top 30 visit. So, um, yeah, just keep looking at the markers. I mean, this list was compiled by markers. Uh, that's it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it didn't take that much of a, of a necessarily like a thought process. It's like, okay, what do they look at? What am I looking at? Let's try to match it up. And this is it. Um, Sorry if it's not one of your favorite players in the draft, but I can't argue with trends and facts. Granted, it's only one draft that I'm going based off of, but I feel like it's a fair enough assumption that they're going to be looking at this stuff.
It is because, again, most organizations are not so rigid that they never go outside of their track, but most of them have patterns that they stick to. They just like the kinds of things that they like, and they have these preferences, and this is it. This is the preferences. Washington probably over the next decade, however long this front office group is here, which may it be till the Lord returns, right? But you know, um, no matter how long they're here, they're not going to stray very far from this group, from this preferences thing that we've already seen, that you've already uncovered here in the very first off season.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, Ben, we got a couple of things we wanted to get to before we get to the mock draft, right?
We do. So here at Box Score Network, we're part of a entire network of podcasts and YouTube shows. So I'm going to do a little ad read for a couple of those. First of all, Tricky Takes. Baseball season is here. We're just 10 games into the season at the time of the recording of this last episode. And Tricky Takes crew is projecting the All-Star Game lineups based on what they've seen so far. They love baseball over there, by the way. Check it out now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. That's Tricky with two eyes. Tricky Takes, a Box Score Network podcast. They are big time MLBers over there. These guys have played baseball at different levels, but they are big time MLB students of the game very much. And then another another group that we've got podcast is Because CONCACAF. This week, Dom and Andy are breaking down the Champions Cup quarterfinals, the U.S. women's national team friendlies against Brazil, and all the headlines from across the region. That's Because CONCACAF with Dom and Andy, Apple and Spotify. Listen, when I told our audiences before that these two guys cover everything soccer, I'm telling you what, just the list I just read there of what they're covering is beyond the scope that I would normally go. That this is like covering NFL football, college football, Australian rules football, Division three football, and more is the kind of scope that these guys get into when it comes to soccer. Okay, so just a heads up on that. That's two of our several growing network here that we have.
Absolutely. Please go check them out on Apple or Spotify or wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. Also follow on Twitter at B Score Network. You'll get updates on all the shows, all the podcasts that get posted. You'll get updates on all of that, and stuff that we post here on YouTube. So another good way to do that is to subscribe. Um, so kind of like the last episode, we're going to do a quick mock draft just on the first couple of rounds. And Ben, I'm going to be acting GM. Adam Peters, obviously he sucks, so we're getting rid of him. I am now acting GM.
Be that.
But but Ben is my most trusted assistant GM that I have probably listened to more than anybody else, and I value his opinions and I value his advice. So he is going to be advising me based on who's going to be available at 29 because we're not doing trades. It's just going to be too complicated to try to figure out packages and so forth. There's several different mock draft simulators that we've used. I believe we used two of them last time. We'll see how much time we have tonight. We're at least going
Yeah.
to use one of these. But Ben's going to advise me based on who's on the board. We're not going to, like I said, we're not going to trade up. We're not going to trade back. We're just going to stick at 29 and pick who's available. So, Ben, we want to do Pro Football Network first.
Yeah, I'm good with any of them. Let me real
Okay.
quick. I'll let you pick while you're doing that. I'll tell the audience what I do like about each one. So there's the PFF mock draft simulator, which I think is the most user friendly. They have the forced trades options, which if you can't get the trade to work out that you think is fair, you can just push the forced trades button. It's great. You can do it live on air. You can do it off air. Any trade that you think is fair, you just go ahead and force it. That's really great. But then it's also user friendly. They've got great analytics on there. It's easy to use. So I really love them. NFL mock draft database draws from a much wider, as it implies in the name, draws from a much wider net of different mock drafts. So you kind of get it more of a kind of a what a lot of people think all stuffed into one usable mock. And so I love that. It's also very easy to use as well, especially when it comes to looking at the different positions. You can tack different positions very quickly and easily that way. And then Pro Football Network is not as easy to use. It's not as user friendly. But the one thing I do love about them, excellent scouting reports that are written in. They don't put them all out way ahead of time, but boy, lots of scouting reports. If you even want more, they've got that full report button there. You can even get a much fuller scouting report on these players. So that really is their great feature there on Pro Football Network's mock draft database. So that's a really good one as well.
Yeah, it really gives you a full thing here. I just picked a Buka just out of curiosity, and man,
Yeah.
it's a whole thing here. Hey, if you want to sponsor Box Score by chance, and you're watching, then shoot us or DM on Twitter at B Score Network because this is some cool stuff right here. Absolutely cool stuff. So let's get back to the simulator here. So we'll go back over, who went. You guys can scroll through here and look at it as you want. Cam Ward went first, no surprise there. Genti, a top 6 pick. Man, that seems a little nuts to me. I know he's going to be a good back, but that seems a little nuts. Um, no real surprise. Shamar Stewart does go top 12 here to 11 to San Francisco. Tyler Warren gone. Mike Green, top 13 pick according to this draft. Shadur Sanders not getting past Pittsburgh. Can't imagine that, but that was a trade. I believe this button indicates a trade. Um, so some stuff looks like the Cowboys traded. Yeah, the Cowboys traded back, picked up Scoreton. Barron's gone. Zabel's gone. Walter Nolan's gone. Even Worry, who you were high on, is gone. And unfortunately, Ezaraku just went the pick right before us.
Oh,
Ah, what a
dadgum
shame.
Lions
Yep, dadgum
suck.
Lions. So these are the top guys available. I can scroll and search as you wish, Mr. Advisor. Um, but it looks like a couple of the guys that were on the list that we talked about earlier are still on there. Ibuka being one of them, James Pierce Jr. being one of them, Hampton, um, Connolly was on our one of our previous lists. Um, yeah, we Travion Henderson's there, but looks like we have some other guys to pick from necessarily. So it's your board, sir.
All right, so here's my two quick thoughts on this. Several of the guys that we thought would be there, that we're okay with taking, that we think the Commanders will legit be looking at, are there, and I'm totally cool if we take one of them. Right? If it's a
Hmm.
Buka, that's fine. If it was a Pierce, that's fine. A Hampton, that's fine. A Luther Burden, I'm completely satisfied. Two guys that weren't part of our list that again we just didn't necessarily think would be here. Part of that is again PFN has their own grading system, and that's fine. They view it differently. Josh Simmons is the obvious one here. I just didn't really think that he would be here sitting at 29, but here he is, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. Is offensive line any longer a huge need for the Commanders? Not necessarily, but Simmons to me is so good that I would really consider drafting him right here. That would be just to me an excellent pick to continue doing what they've started, right? They've
Hmm.
started the work of this offensive line, and you just keep that up because it's not really a young offensive line by and large. It's kind of a
Oh,
mix. Some of these guys are going to cycle out. So totally happy if we get Josh Simmons. The other guy here is a guy named Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. He's just a little bit farther down. Pro Football Network has consistently
yep.
graded him a lot lower than I have and than a lot of people have. Most of that is because they really see him as a run stopper, not really as a quarterback, get after it kind of a guy, and that's fine. My contention would be that he is so large and so athletic that he is a brilliant run stopper, but he's also just a massive presence, even if he never gets to the quarterback. If you have that view of him, that his ability to just push the pocket is a big deficit too. So that's a guy I would really consider. I don't even think I'm going to make a specific recommendation here, but between Kenneth Grant, Simmons, Ibuka, and then probably O'Mary and Hampton, those four, I think that would be where my pick would lie.
So it's a guy that we have not discussed, I don't believe at all, but I am curious because there is a lot of injury concerns. But if he had a clean bill of health, he'd probably be one of the top guys in the draft, Ben Morrison. What is your opinion on him?
Yeah, and listen, by the way, we just did me and two other cohorts, Shane and Austin did a show earlier tonight where we talked about him as well, doing a mock draft for the Patriots, also on YouTube. We all love Benjamin Morrison, absolutely love him, but it's all based on the tape. If you were to go back to say the start of 2024, there were three guys that were considered to be just neck and neck at the finish line for the best cover corner in college football, and it was Will Johnson out of Michigan, it was Travis Hunter out of Colorado, and it was Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame. And it was all neck and neck. Well, having watched the tape, I don't put Morrison with those two guys at all, but I still love him. And any reason for him to drop clear out of the first round, as far as I can tell, is injury based. And that does seem to be a thing that hasn't gone away, which does make you wonder because these NFL teams aren't releasing this information. It does make you wonder, are they concerned about his injury long term? Or are they just simply realizing that he's not yet ready and people don't really want to invest a first round pick in somebody who's not ready? And that, either one is reason enough to knock him out of the first round. If you look at the tape, though, the tape is fantastic. There's really no reason not to draft him other than the medical side, which, because you and I don't get to examine his knee, or maybe it's the hip. I forget. I think it's the hip.
Hmm.
Because we don't get to examine that, then we just don't know.
You've been a Siobhan Ravel defender previously. Are you
Yes.
recommending him here with the people that are also the other people that are on the board?
Yeah, I would love it. I do love him better with some other defenses. For instance, like the Vikings, who tend to play a more aggressive, random, wreck it, sock it, get after it kind of a style. I do prefer him better. I would like him here too, but I kind of do feel like because listen, I do like Rebel better than Harrison. I want to be clear on that. He would be higher on my big board, but I do feel like Harrison's sticky kind of a coverage, which I don't even know if yeah, Harrison's probably still here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
if I were going to pick a corner here, I do like Harrison's kind of sticky style a bit better for what I think the Commanders' defense would be.
All right. I think I've narrowed it down to a couple of guys here. Actually, this is harder than I thought. Um,
This is fun, man. This
this
is
is
hard and
fun.
fun.
I will tell you. So I'm just going based off of pretty much ceiling as we can get out of this pick. But also production, like we want a guy that's going to be able to contribute right away. But a guy that I want a higher end ceiling on. So guys that I'm looking at for that are James Pierce Jr. obviously just because the raw talent is just, I mean, it speaks for itself.
It does.
Amarian Hampton, he would be a game changer day one for this offense. I mean, a backfield with him, Daniels, and potentially a Debo Samuel and Austin Eckler. I mean, just get out of here with that. That would be absolutely fantastic. Um, and then there was another guy here too. Oh yeah, Josh Simmons. Because I mean, I don't. It wouldn't be my first choice, but again, I can be persuaded to pick a Josh Simmons if he's a plug and play guy, and I can just set it and forget it, and I don't have to worry about tackle for at least 5 years.
Yeah, I will say on Simmons because there are people that like Simmons even much better than I do. There are people who like Simmons up at 15 and 14 levels.
Right,
You know,
right.
the one thing I saw about Simmons that I did not like, and this was the only thing, I did see him. I don't want to say consistently, but with not randomness, get beaten at times off the edge by the quicker edge rushers. Which would mean in the NFL, if that's happening, it probably would happen. You're just going to have to keep a tight end over there on the passing downs, right?
Hmm.
Other than that, I do think he's plug and play, but I'm not convinced that at the end of if he's letting edgers get by at the college level from time to time, he's probably going to do that at the NFL level too. So I wouldn't fight for Simmons. I'd be totally fine with the Omarion Hampton pick and the Pierce pick. You know, Pierce may not be a 3 down guy either, but the speed off the edge is so tremendous. Washington could use that really, really badly.
It's probably irresponsible, but I'm going to Marion Hampton. It's just too.
Done.
It's too fun. It's too fun. I mean, look, I would love a James Pierce. I'm not going to you know, fight anyone that would rather have him than Amari and Hampton. It's just me, and yes, first round running back, not a great idea. I understand, unless he's a truly a game changer. I believe he can be. He's got all the tools there. He's got speed. He's got power. He's a bit of a bigger guy. One of the few bigger guys in this draft at running back. That has still has some decent speed, some good quickness and good vision. He's got everything, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So I'm more than okay spending 29 on Omari and Hampton. And he makes everyone's life on offense. I mean, Terry McLaurin's, Debo Samuels, Jaden Daniels, he makes his life a hell of a lot easier. Even Austin Eckler. I mean, he what doesn't he solve, right? I mean, and you've already invested a lot in the offensive line. Ideally, the run blocking gets better because of that. And there you go.
So there are two groups here. There's going to be the Hampton lovers, of which Austin Freed from Tricky Takes, the podcast we mentioned a few minutes ago, is one. So he's giving you a standing ovation, and he's part of Hampton Nation who just loves Hampton. And some of them would draft him up at 15, 14, 13, right? They are
Right.
that much believers. And then you've got the folks who unfortunately are like need based, and that's fine too. I respect that viewpoint. They're like, man, we don't need running back. We got all these needs on defense. We got
Yeah.
needs elsewhere.
And I get it. I
We
get
get
it.
it. We thought about it.
Yeah. I
But
totally get it.
we ain't turning down good football players. So if Hampton's the pick here, we're happy. We're strength building. If we're doing that, we get it. We're gonna score a lot of points and give up a lot. Oh well, welcome to 2025 Commanders. Okay,
Yeah.
but we're not gonna turn out a football player that we love. Hampton fits. Listen, Hampton fits everything that you mentioned earlier, right? The RAS score, the TC, mine and your original diagnosis of who might be in this round. It's all there.
Yeah, absolutely. He fits. He fits. That's it. I was stupid and I didn't select 2 rounds, so we'll just do another round really quick. Let's go to a different database here really quick. We'll do NFL mock draft base simulator, and I'll do 2 rounds.
Yeah,
Not being
absolutely.
not being an idiot this time. So we'll go fast, and it's just also cool just to see who else, another system, how they would do it, how they would process everything here, um, and see who will be available. It might be
It
more
is,
guys, might be less guys.
and this is
Whoa, whoa, that's
and I
that's
apologize. AirPods went out, so I've had to switch to a different microphone. Can you guys hear me
uh
now? Okay.
yes, I can.
All right. Apologies to the audience, and just a reminder: one thing, poker players, a lot of the computer poker players who went on to become professionals, a lot of them learned by just simulation, thousands of hands over time. It is the one feature I do like about computer mocks is that it allows you to just repeatedly run scenario after scenario after scenario. NFL teams do this at their headquarters with themselves. We do it on a computer here where we just simulate lots and lots and lots of different picks and see what's still sitting there.
I mean, I don't really think that this is much of a I don't know how to go back on this one to see who has already been picked, but Jahad Campbell's available somehow in this mock draft at 29. Josh Simmons is there. Kenneth Grant is still there. Omarion Hampton is there. Tyler Bookett, he was one of the guys that we were looking at that would probably be available. Igbuka's there. Connerly, Hairston, Ravel, Scourton is there. Henderson, Morrison, Taylor. I mean, we got pretty much our pick, really. I mean,
Right.
I know you're going to advise me, but I'm imagining Jahad Campbell is the selection here if I had to guess.
It is, and listen, there are people who are even higher on Campbell than I am, but I like Campbell. I like him somewhere in late first, early second round. There are people who like him at 12, 13, 14.
Yeah.
Totally fine with that. It's that kind of draft. I like Campbell. I think he's a great fit for the Washington defense. I really do. I think he would just fit in so perfectly and beautifully there. And I realize that they don't necessarily need a starting linebacker this next season, and I don't care. We talked about it 2 weeks ago, how they really need the depth. They're one injury away from being a one-man show, and that might even be an old one-man show at linebacker, you know. But even if they don't need the starter, even if they don't have any injuries and they don't need the depth this year, you still like to have 3 people that you can put on the field at any time at linebacker, and come next year or the year after, you're going to need one. So I love the Campbell pick here, and you can put him in an edge rusher if you want to, right? If
Yep.
you're like, hey, we don't want him a linebacker, we want him at edge. Fine, put him at edge. Done.
Yeah. I mean, if he's there, then something went wrong somewhere, right? I mean, I can't imagine that he's in reality going to be there at 29. I just can't imagine a scenario like that. But I mean, hey, it's the NFL draft. Things happen, right? Things happen that we don't typically predict. Wow. I mean, heck, we got heck of a selection here at 61 here. We got Landon Jackson, who is a true edge rusher. We got Jaden Higgins, who had a very high RAS score, and is a bigger bodied receiver out of Iowa State. And we got Judkins here at running back, who I mean we can solve also, and we got Schweisinger at linebacker. If we really want to sit, we got Xavier Watts here, Jack Sawyer, Trey Harris, Jalen Noel, who is a take the top off the defense type of receiver. Um, if we again want to address edge with Oladejo, Demetrius Knight, who we talked about a couple weeks ago, who you were really high on as a linebacker, but again, we just did that. Isaiah Bond is still here. I mean, we have our, if I wouldn't select Scatterboo when we got Judkins still here, but again, excuse me, everyone's preference. So, Mr. Advisor, where are you pointing me?
All right, boss. I'm excited. I already know who I want, no
Yep.
doubt. But just to do our homework and so the audience can see it, if you don't mind, would you hit safety first, the safety group up there?
Yep.
Just because that's kind of a need for us. I want to be clear. There are guys there that I like. So those top three guys, whether it's Watts, who I like, he's solid. Makuba, who I like, and then Winston, who's very athletic, has a high ceiling. But we don't need them compared to this other guy that I like. At cornerback, which is another big need, it runs out quick, man. We're at pick 61, and it's a huge drop off at CB here. I would not take any of these guys here at pick 61 myself. At edge, yeah, another need. There's decent guys here.
Yeah.
Jackson and Sawyer, and even Oladejo.
Yep.
I like those guys. I would take them at 61, but they don't excite me. They're fine. They would come in, be good rotation guys, maybe become legit starters at some point. It's kind of how I feel about them. What's another need group that we got? Is there another one?
I mean, I would consider. I mean, it's not a high need. I would consider wide receiver a need. We got, I think, a couple of guys here.
Okay.
That there's kind of a cluster here
Yeah.
of guys. From Kyle Williams up, Savion Williams, Isaiah Bond, Ayamaner, Noel Harris, Higgins. Also Judkins. I mean, I feel like that is also. I'm not interested in Scatterboo at 61. I'm just not. I'm not. I'm
Right.
not a Scatterboo guy, but Judkins here I would consider.
Yeah.
Not my favorite, but again, I would consider it.
Right.
Tight end, we don't really have anything Ferguson. I just think that's too high for him. If you wanted to trade back and get him
Yeah.
in the third, then I'm fine with that. But again, not a need. Tackle, nothing here is exciting me. But again, I'm not a. I know Belton is currently on a top 30 visit, so we're interested in him kind of on a day two pick. But
Wow.
um, yeah, there's nothing here at tackle or probably guard. I don't see interior offensive lineman. I mean, if we wanted to, there's a cluster of guys here. But again, I'm not. I would look more towards wide receiver or running back personally. Or if you wanted to pick up Atlanta Jackson, who's good at setting the edge on the run game. I mean, it is your pick, but I think right now, based on who's on the board, I would either go receiver or running back here, and I would just listen to you on who to pick.
There's a number of guys here I like, and I would be satisfied to get them. Even say a Wyatt Millum out of West Virginia, plug him in at tackle. I don't think he'll ever be great, but I think he could be a plug and play kind of a day one starter at tackle, right tackle. And then even an Emory Jones, who probably should be drafted a little farther down, but he's an interior offensive line guy. I think he would make a fantastic guard myself. But boy, that's not going to excite me. Here's what excites me over at wide receiver, and that is going to be Jaden Higgins out of Iowa
Yes.
State. You already mentioned.
Yes.
Here's why I like him. I'll get to why I don't. I wouldn't draft him in, say, top 20 picks. But here's why I'm thrilled to death. You've already did it.
I already did it. I agreed with it 100%.
Look, when I watched him, I saw several things that I like. Number one, I see a grown man out there playing wide receiver.
Yep.
I'm going to be very insulting here for a second, and I don't actually think this way, but it feels this way. Some of the other wide receivers in this year's draft class are like Smurfs, okay?
Yeah.
They're tiny. They're not very big. They're not very physical. Some of them are somewhat physical, but they're just not a big group. And I'm okay with that. If your offense needs that and your OC is willing to use that, fine. Believe in it. I believe in it. I've encouraged people to do it for decades, literally. But when I go back and I look at Higgins, I see a grown man out there. I see an NFL wide receiver. I see him catching passes. I see him catching contested passes. He does some acrobatic stuff, but he doesn't have to do much of it because he's just generally able to run his routes and collect his passes without having to do fancy stuff or boundary stuff, right? Um, I see I see the same thing from him that I saw out of Emeka Ibuka, and that is the run after the catch. It's consistent. He consistently gets more yards than just where he caught it at. he almost never goes down with that first tackle. Usually it takes the second, third guy to get him down. Um, he doesn't have too many home run balls on his resume. He's just not going to do a lot of that for you. But boy, this guy just looks like an NFL ready wide receiver to me. Um, he can out muscle people for these passes. He can establish like a rebounder in basketball. He can establish a position. He can go up and get the ball. It's not like he's not necessarily going to win every 50-50 ball, but he's going to win more than his share of those 50-50 balls by a good bit. I think maybe he might be in the 60-70 range of winning those things. He gets open. He's not the route runner that Abuka is, but is very good. You don't see many drops on his part. There's a couple, but not many. Just really, really like this guy. I like him so good. I would even consider him up at pick 29. I don't think I
I
would
would
do
too.
it, but that's where I'm at with him. And to get him at 61, I'm just very thrilled, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. 6 foot 215, runs a 4.40, 39-inch vert. I mean, he's got a 9.6 RAS score, so he fits the bill. In terms of, if we continue to look at that as a marker
Right.
for this front office, he fits, and he's probably. Would you say he's an X receiver?
Yeah, I would. Because again, I don't know that he's ever truly going to be the number one guy. I don't want to say he could never fill the number one bill, but yeah, I would call him an X, and I think that's a good receiver on any team, but probably would be my ideal number two receiver on a on a lot of NFL teams, if I could put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you pair him with McLaurin and Debo, and you
Right.
got yourself a hell of a wide receiver room. Jahad Campbell and Jaden Higgins, I think Commander fans would be doing backflips, honestly. And to be honest with you, we should be regardless of who they pick. You know why? Because we have a quarterback, we have a coach, we have a GM and a front office that is not toxic. And any of these guys that they end up picking, it's just going to increase the level of talent that we have on this team. And regardless of the position they play, you should be happy about it. We all have our favorite players. We all have our draft crushes. We all have those. And I don't, I'm not going to hold it against you if we don't pick the guy that you want and you're a little upset. If you go off on Twitter about it, yeah, my a little bit. Unless they draft Jackson Dart at 29, right? That's reason to get upset. Any
Right.
other player, really any other player at any other position, it's not going to be it shouldn't be a big deal. It really shouldn't. You should be happy that you got a quality player to be on your team that's going to help your team. And I'd be thrilled with a variety of combinations at 29 and 61, even if we end up staying and we don't end up trading back.
I'll even add one thing here on Jaden Higgins because it's a hobby horse of mine, so I try not to bring it up all the time because it gets obnoxious, right?
So obnoxious, Ben.
Yes, and I apologize. So, but here it comes. The production there is Higgins now for 2 years as
Yes.
well. Just
Hmm.
really good production. And that's not there with all of these guys. It's not there with Colston Loveland out of Michigan necessarily. It's not there with the Texas receivers, Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond. That production is not there. So what you're starting to look at with those kind of guys is, well, it's traits. The traits are showing and the measurables are showing, but and listen, it's always easy to say, well, they didn't produce because of this and they didn't produce because of that. And I get it. I draft players with that mindset. But with Higgins, you don't have to do that. You just look and you see the production, and you're like, okay, well, on top of everything else, the RAS, the tape, the size, the production is there. 2 years of it. So another reason that I really do, love the Higgins pick there.
Yeah, and if people recall back to a couple weeks ago in our last episode, that was one thing that I was looking for was
Yep.
production,
Right.
right? And Higgins fits that perfectly. I think it is a little high at 29 to take him. If he somehow fall, I don't see him getting out of the top 40, 45 picks. I think he's going to be one of the
Yeah.
first picks on night two. if he makes it to 61, something's wrong somewhere. Either medicals didn't come back right, or teams just lost their ever loving minds. I don't see him falling to 61. I don't see Jahad Campbell falling to 29 either. So that draft was, like I said, I'd be doing backflips if that's the two guys that we ended up getting. Um, but again, just a good exercise that we did. We hope that you guys enjoyed it. I know me and Ben do. We enjoy this stuff. Um, and I hope you guys come back in a couple weeks to hear our reactions on the entire draft, uh, 2025 for Washington Commanders. Ben, do you have any final closing thoughts on the whole exercise that we did? Any messages for the audience? Anything like that?
Yeah, just check us out, Odds on Favorite on Apple and Spotify for
Yes.
our podcast that comes out every 2 weeks, alternating with this YouTube show. And then, like I said before, check out the Box Score Network on YouTube and on the Apple Spotify podcast. Been a privilege. Hope y'all enjoy the draft in a week and a half, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right. Enjoy the drafts and try not to go crazy on Twitter regardless of what happens. I mean, like I said, unless they draft a quarterback, which isn't going to happen probably at all. We didn't even talk about that. They're not going to draft a quarterback this year.
Right.
But unless they draft a quarterback, just chill. Seriously, just chill. We need everything. We need everything. Do I need to bring back the slides? Do I really need to do that? I will do it
Don't
to
make him
prove
do
it.
it.
I will do it. I will do it. Thank you all. Make sure you're following Box Score at B Score Network. Subscribe, start notifications, get notifications on whenever we post. It would really help us out, and you'll get to see some great content. So, another mock draft for Box Score is probably going to get put out by next week, right, Ben?
Yeah, we are planning one to do probably Monday night is when we'll do it, and it'll probably come out on Tuesday, which will be maybe 3-4 days for the draft.
Yep. 2 days, less than 48 hours probably before the draft. So stay tuned for that. And we will see you guys next week on the podcast, or we'll see you guys back here on YouTube for reaction on the 2025 NFL drafts.